So this is day 4 of training within Fusion 360. We'll take a look at a couple of things around the Fusion 360 drawing environment. But before we go ahead and crack on with that, welcome everyone who's participating in the World Skills Ireland competition in September 2023. Hopefully you can learn a good bit today and you can apply that knowledge when you're participating in the competition itself. So just as a quick introduction for myself, my name is Sid. I primarily work with Inventor and Fusion 360, basically design software that I work with. Fusion 360 sheet metal would be my primary sort of area where I work in. So the next 2 sessions that you have got scheduled, the one that is on the drawing detail and the one on sheet metals will be covered by myself. I think my other colleague Lorenzo will be covering up the rendering and animation setup within Fusion 360. So lots of content to come over in the next few days, and hopefully you can pick up a few good bits. So without wasting any more time, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started working within the Fusion 360 environment. So just bear with me a couple of seconds here and we'll get started on this. Okay, so I suppose everybody can see my screen here. I'm sure you're already all familiar with the Fusion 360 environment. Over the last couple of sessions, I think Brian has covered how to work within the part environment, how to create assemblies, components, just basic product design stuff that I suppose has been done over the last few sessions. Today, what we'll be taking a look at is going to be a few bits around the drawing environment, how to create drawings within Fusion 360, how to create different sorts of views such as base views, projected views. Essentially, we'll be exploring the drawing environment for Fusion 360. We'll also take a look at the dimensioning types that you can actually use within Fusion, how you can also go about creating or generating drawing views, how you can export them out, and also how you can add in tolerances into your model if needed, or into your drawings if needed. So first things first, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I will bring up the drawing environment, which can again be accessed by this panel up here. So if you click into that, it gives you the option to create drawings from either the design or from the animation. So generally, you can either go from design automatically, or you can also go from animation. So if you've created exploded views and you needed to go create exploded view drawings, you can do that from the animation itself. Now, what I'm just going to go ahead and do is I'm going to open up my drawing file here, or my product file here, which is this little body pump that I've got. So at the moment, you can see it's currently situated in an isometric view. What I can essentially do is make modifications to this if I had to. So using your solid modeling tools, you can make changes, you can edit this part. Generally, once you've completed your part environment, or once you've created the product that you need, you can then go ahead and just click on the little panel up here, click on the drawing environment, and go select from design. Now, the first thing that happens when you click on From Design, Fusion 360 will prompt you what contents you'd like to bring in. You can either go ahead and choose whether you'd like to bring in the full assembly, or you'd only like to go for the visible part of the assembly you're currently looking at. So it is possible to essentially create drawing views either of the full assembly or of the part assembly as well. So essentially, when I say part assembly, what I mean is if you want to create section views, if you want to hide a few bits on your model and only show specific areas to your manufacturing team or to your engineering team, you can create drawing views accordingly as well. So in this case, we'll stick to the full assembly for now. You have the ability to go for a new drawing view completely. Template can be set up, or you can either use one from scratch. Now, when I say template, template is basically whenever you create drawings, what tends to happen is there are going to be bits of information that will be repeated. Repeated content on your templates or on your drawing files essentially means little title blocks, or the way that your dimensions are being put in, or the tolerances that are being put in, or even trying to insert your company or your team logo uh, into your uh, into your title blocks if needed. So what you can do is once you've got your template set up, you can go ahead and use that same template over and over again. So you don't have to keep doing the exercise. You can only set it up once, or rather you only have to set it up once, and you can keep reusing that over and over again as you see fit. So it just makes things a bit more easier and a bit more convenient when you have to use a set template. You don't have to go about doing that again and again. So it saves you a bit of time and it gets you going within the drawing environment as quickly as possible. In terms of standard, you can either go for the ASME standard or the ISO. We're going to stick to ISO for now. You can also define the units that you want on your drawing sheet. So I'm going to go for millimeters, and you can also define the sheet size depending on what your needs are. So I'm going to leave that at A3 at the moment, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. So what this then does is basically it's going to create a drawing template for me, or a blank drawing sheet for me. You can see it's already got my name on there, it's already got the date, and it's already got the pump or the part name or the assembly name, whatever part you're hoping to use within the drawing environment. So it'll automatically pick up those names and indications. And if I just zoom in here, you can see it also has a couple of other quantities in here in this title block by default. Along with that default title block, what I have here is on the right hand side, I have this window where I can adjust what sort of orientation I want to bring in. So by default, whenever you try and create a drawing view from the Fusion part environment, it's automatically going to ask you, or it's automatically going to prompt you what sort of orientation you want to go with. Now in this case, I have multiple options that I can go with. So say if I change it to the top view, it's automatically going to adjust the view to reflect the little top view there. I can also stick to the front, right, or any other views that you see fit as your base view. I'm just going to stick it to the front view for now. And the next couple of options on that list, then I have the ability to adjust the style. So if you hover over each one of these options, it will essentially tell you what they are. At the moment, by default, I have visible and hidden edges available to me. What I can do here is set it up to visible edges if I do not want the hidden edges to show up. Now, you don't have to worry about setting these up right off scratch. What you basically have is the ability to make alterations even at a later stage if you wanted to. You also have the ability to adjust the scaling, tangent edges, if there are any on your model and you would like to turn them off or you'd like to make them visible, you can adjust that. You also have thread edges that can be made visible, and also center marks and center lines that can automatically be inserted um, as soon as you place a base view. I'm just going to adjust and place my base view right here on the drawing sheet. It highlights the OK button there for me at the bottom of that window, and I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, once I've created my base view here, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom into this base view that I've placed. At any given stage, what I can actually do is I can double click on this, or I can even hit right click after having selected the view. So essentially, clicking the right click button or choosing the view with the left click once and then hitting the right click button gives you a couple of these options, such as editing the view, projected view, annotations, if any. You wanted to adjust right off the bat, or you also have the ability to move the view or delete it entirely if required. I'm just going to go ahead and click on edit view here. So what it essentially does is it will bring up the same menu for me. And like I said, you don't have to make sure that all the selections that you've made are being done within the first drawing view window itself. You can place the view and you can always come back and make changes if you want it. Now, in this case, we've gone and selected visible with hidden edges. If I just switch it off to visible edges there, you will see it essentially takes off all the hidden edges off that view. So I'm going to leave it at that and close down this drawing view edit window, essentially giving me the ability to work through the rest of the views that I want to place. Now, before we go ahead and get started with placing views, I'd like to show you the drawing environment within Fusion 360. Now, the base idea of the drawing environment essentially is to create and place drawing views. So the first tab or the first panel up on the top ribbon that you see is essentially all your quantities from where you can choose what sort of views to place. So the first one that's available is a base view. The second one that's available is a projected view. You've also got auxiliary views, section views, and detail views as well. if you do end up with a model that, say, is bigger than the sheet you're working on, you can also break views if needed. So say if you have a design of a shaft or a design of a connecting rod or anything of that sort that is larger than your drawing sheet, and you're unable to place the full view on your drawing sheet itself, you can end up using the break view option as well. On the create tab, again, it gives you these little options here. So just in case you're not familiar with the icons and you need to use the drop down, you can also do that from here. You also have a little shortcut there for the projected view where you can set it up by hitting the little P button on your keyboard, which will essentially start up your projected views. Now, the first thing that I'm going to go ahead and do here is place a projected view. So again, you can either do it three ways. The first way being you can either click on the top ribbon, so you've got the projected view option. You can either hit the letter P for Paris or projected view on your keyboard, or you can also select the view, right click on it, and choose the projected view option from the heads-up display itself. Say if I go for that, I'm then able to go ahead and place my projected view right next to the model that is, or right next to the base view that I've already got on my drawing sheet. Now, within this drawing sheet, I also have the ability to move the mouse cursor in any direction I want. So you can see with the way that the mouse actually moves, it changes the orientation or it changes the view depending on how I see it. So it can also give you isometric, or it can also give you side views, top views. Depending on wherever you'd like to place the view, you can adjust and you can manipulate the views automatically. I'm just going to go ahead and place this little projected view from the side onto my, or from the top onto my drawing sheet here. So just left clicking once will place it onto my drawing sheet. Now, just placing the view does not guarantee that the view will show up. You need to hit this little green check mark currently hidden by the little blue ball on the cursor. If you hit the green check mark, it should place the or generate the drawing view for you. If in case the green check mark box does not show up, you also have the ability to just go right click and choose OK. So once you hit OK, it's going to place that drawing view onto your model. So at the moment, I've got my drawing view properly in position. I've got my base view. I've also got my projected view available. Now the next thing that I can focus on is placing other views onto this drawing sheet. Now, say for example, you choose to place a section view of one of these parts or one of these assemblies on your model. The easiest way to do it would be to select the section view option up top. So from the top ribbon, I'm going to go ahead and click on the section view. Zoom into the base or the projected view from which I want to create my section view, which is going to be this one up here. Now with this, what I have the ability is to select the parent view. So depending on what your parent view is, Fusion 360 will give you the option to go ahead and define your sectioning lines. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this little projected view that we've got. And now you can see, along with my cursor, I have the little symbol show up or the label show up telling me where my sectioning view is. Now for that, what I'm going to do is hover over this little edge up here and just zoom in to the point where it gives me this little triangular icon. Now this little triangular icon essentially indicates the midpoint of that view. So I'm going to hover over it and then move my mouse just vertically upward, essentially still trying to maintain contact with the midpoint without clicking anything so far. So once, say, you've hovered over that midpoint and you go vertically up, you have the ability to go ahead and place your sectioning line. So this is going to be the starting point of my sectioning line, and with the help of the left click, I'm able to do that. I'm going to, sorry, apologies, I seem to have clicked twice there accidentally. I'm going to go ahead and click on my parent view, click on the little midpoint there. I'm sorry. Click on the parent view, click on the little, or hover over the midpoint, go vertically up, click here first for the first point of my, for the first point or for the initial point on the little sectioning view. Go down vertically there and try and capture the midpoint. Again, I'm not making any clicks just yet. I'm going to go vertically further down, slightly outside of my model, and then click for the endpoint or the second point for my for my sectioning line. Now, once that has been done, I have the ability to check the little green mark there, completing my sectioning view or my sectioning line, and I'm then able to just place this little view next to my model. Now, Once say you've got the view in there, you still have the ability to choose what sort of style you want to go with. So you can either go with visible edges, you can either go with from parent view, or you can make it associated with the parent view, which would be this little top view that we've got. Essentially, if you wanted to create a link of views between the parent and the section view, you have the ability and the choice to do that. Now I also have the ability to rename the label. So you can see currently it gives me a label view for AA, which is going to be my sectioning line in this case. I have the ability to replace that label with any name that I see fit. And that label is also what will then appear above or below my sectioning view. So you also then have the ability from the section depth menu to select what sort of sectioning value you want. You can also choose whether you'd like to slice it or you'd like to specify a distance for how that sectioning line essentially works. At the moment, because it's been set to a full depth, it's going to give you a full section view, and I'm just going to go hit OK on this. So you can see I have my section view label up here, and I have the ability to go ahead and just drag it a little bit out of position to make sure that it sits right on top of my sectioning view. Now, just to observe this little sectioning view we have, so depending on whatever these section lines are, it's going to give you a specific section view of that sort. You also have the ability when you place these section views to go ahead and make changes to these hatch patterns. Now, usually the way that these hatch patterns would work is on the fact that wherever your sectioning line cuts through your model, or whatever parts gets sectioned off by the little sectioning line, it's going to give you these little patterns out here. So I have the ability to go ahead and choose what sort of pattern I want to go with. If you wanted to increase the scale, if you wanted to change the angle on which this little hatch pattern appears, you can do that from this menu itself. Now, the next thing that we're also going to focus on is adding another section view from this base view that we've got. So if I just zoom into the base view that I created initially, I have the ability to go ahead and create a sectioning line once again. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the section view option up here. And in this case, I have the ability to select my parent view. I can then select what is going to be my frame of reference or what's going to be my point of reference. So what I'm going to go with is just this little point up here. So you can see I'm going with one of the legs on the model. So say if I place one of my starting points with the sectioning line there and the end point just up there and hit the little check mark, it gives me the ability to place this sectioning view down here. Now, once that is done, I can go hit OK, and I also have the label for this view, which I can then move down. You also have the ability to go ahead and move this sectioning line or just even move the label for this model. So just even if you accidentally say drag it, it's going to automatically adjust your view depending on the way you've actually positioned it. So I have the ability to hit the undo command here and place it back into position. Now, say if you wanted to move this little view label or if you want to alter this view label, you have the ability to go ahead and, sorry, that's not the option. Now, say if you're not happy enough with the direction of this little sectioning line, right? It's pointing downward at the moment. I'm just going to go right click on it and I'm going to modify this. Second. Sorry, no. So even if you say you delete that view entirely and you try and place another section view there, you can also do that. Say that is my starting point and that there is my endpoint then. No. Okay, there we go. So once I've got this placed, I'm just going to go ahead and say continue. So this is the correct orientation of the direction that I wanted that to be in. And now it will place my section view in position. So I should be able to reverse the direction of this one. I'm just going to go ahead and edit the view. Now here is where our depth option comes into play, where you can decide what sort of depth you want to go with. Say if you're happy enough with the orientation of the little sectioning line that you've got, you should then be able to just go ahead and place or move the labels as you see fit. Now, while we place the base, projected, and the sectioning views, the next thing I want to focus on is going to be placing the detail view. Now, the detail view is this little icon up top on the top ribbon where you have the little A button there available. I'm going to select this as my parent view. Now, within this, what I can actually do is specify the center point or center point for the detail boundary. Now, before I go ahead and do that, I'm just going to go ahead and position where the detail view should come off from. So say if I go ahead and select that as my parent view, I have the ability to focus on this region of my model, place that as my center point for the detail view, and say if I specify the size of the boundary. Now it depends on how much detail you want to include on the next detail view that you place. So it's totally dependent on you on how you prefer that to show up. So say if I go ahead and specify that as the size of the boundary, Fusion 360 automatically does it for me, where I can place this little detail view right here at the bottom. Now, at the moment, its style is going to depend on how the parent actually is being set up. So because this is our parent view, I'm just going to leave it at that and go hit OK. And once that is done, I can still move these little labels around, and it also gives you the option to go ahead and look at this little detail view that we've got. Now, in this case, what you also have is the ability to go ahead and just move these labels out of position if needed. Just in case you wanted to increase the size or reduce the size, you have the ability to go ahead and grab onto any of these points that show up when you click on the detail view. That essentially what it will do is it will change the sizing of your detail view automatically by corresponding to the size of your of the circle on the detail view itself. So essentially, this is what the drawing environment basically is all about. What we'll go ahead and do in this next exercise then is we'll take a look at a couple of options here on how we can add in center lines, center marks, patterns, and so on. So in this case, what I'm going to do is you can either go ahead and create um, so we'll focus on the regions from where you can actually pick up these tools. So if you look at the top ribbon, you've got these little options up here. The first one being the center line, second one being the center mark, and the third one then being the center mark pattern. So depending on what your needs are, and also depending on what you're going with or what you're going for, you can choose what sort of geometry you want to go ahead and create. Now, say just in case you wanted to create the center line option, you can go ahead and select that either from the icon itself or from the drop down if you're more comfortable with that one. What I'm going to go ahead and do in this case is I will select this little option here where I can go ahead and select my geometry. So let's start off by selecting the option up top where it gives you the centerline option. Now you can see Fusion will prompt you to select the first sort of edge that you want to go ahead and create this centerline from. So I'm going to focus on this little section that is on the right hand side here. So the one with the label AA on it, that's the one that I'm interested in. I'm going to go ahead and choose these two edges up here. So essentially, when you click on the first and the second edge, it essentially creates that line for you. You can go ahead and right click and say, okay, once you're happy enough with the orientation and the length, or once you're happy enough with placing the center line in position. Now, the next thing, right, in this case is you'd obviously want the center line to go ahead and be completely passing through the part rather than just halfway through the model. So in this case, what I can do is click on this little line here, and I can grab onto any of these arrows here and be able to extend it out depending on how far I want passing through my model. So essentially, just in case you needed to adjust the size of this little center line, you can click on it anytime, and you can grab onto the arrows to move it around and resize it according to the way you want. Now, the next thing that I'm going to focus on is going to be just around the center mark command. So in this case, what we're going to focus on is we're going to start by looking at how the center mark should essentially be placed on the model. Now, if you hover over it, it'll tell you what exactly that command is for. The shortcut for that also is the letter C on your keyboard. So just in case you needed to activate it, you can hit the letter C for center mark and it'll get activated automatically. Now, in this case, what I have here is a couple of circles that I can make use of. So if you want to place a center mark just up here, I'm just going to go ahead and select the center mark command. Essentially, I can pick on any of the holes or any of the rounded edges that I want to enter the center mark onto. So as soon as you select that and click on the little holes or those circular features, Fusion 360 will automatically add in a couple of holes there, or a couple of center marks on top of those existing holes on your model. Now, just coming back to the little projected view on the side here, if you wanted to select that, what you can do is you can also just click on these little holes here, and with the help of one single click, you're able to add in these center marks on your model itself. Just going to add that one in there as well. Now, we'll also do this for the holes visible in any of the other views. So we'll go ahead and add that into this view C that we've got. And that is how you can essentially add in your center mark. Now, the final thing in this exercise that we're going to focus on essentially is going to be this little option here called the center mark pattern. Now, usually when you create circular patterns on your model, or circular patterns in general, what tends to happen is it's not feasible to have a center line marking for each one of these holes, or center marks for each one of these holes. So in that case, what you can actually do is click on the center mark pattern and focus on where the pattern actually is. So just on this little base view that we have, if you look at these three holes, even if you hover over them, you'll see Fusion 360 actually gives you the option to place this little center mark in a patterned manner. Now, usually the way you would insert this is you would follow a clockwise direction until you end up back to the hole you started off from. So if I go say in a clockwise direction here, say if I click there once, I have the ability to include all three holes on that model if needed. So just in case you wanted to add the other one there as well, and also pick up on the third one, that's how you would go about selecting these holes. So once you select each one of these holes that you want to include on your pattern, Fusion 360 will automatically change the orientation of how that circular line essentially works. Now, at the moment, I also have the ability to either auto-complete this or add in center marks as well as I go along. Say if I was to check that little box, it'll automatically add in center marks there as well. If I uncheck that, it's going to take it off when I hit OK. Now, essentially, this is how you go about adding in center lines, center marks, and centered. And essentially, this is how you go about adding in these patterns and these icons into your model. Now, the next thing or the next exercise that we're going to take a look at is going to be just around adding dimensions to an object. Now, again, we'll be working through this drawing sheet as we go along, and we'll place our views and place our patterns and so on accordingly. Now, just bear with me 1 second before we get started on this. Now, the thing that we're going to work through now is going to be just these little dimension options that are available at the top of your inventory or top of your Fusion windows. Essentially, with this, what we'll be able to do is add in a couple of dimensions that we need to make use of. So general dimensions, ordinate dimensions are what we're going to focus on initially. So in this case, what we're going to go ahead and work with is going to be the general dimensioning tool. So if you go ahead and click on this little option up here where you have the dimension tool available, you can also activate that with the letter D for dimension on your keyboard. If I say come down to this little view up here, you can see Fusion 360 automatically wants to pick up the edges and give you specific lengths for those exact edges. Now in this case, what I can do is I can just click on the edge and I can place the dimensions onto my model. Similarly down here, so a vertical and a horizontal dimension is being placed. I can also go ahead and just add in a couple of other dimensions here. So say if you wanted to add in a couple of lengths or just even the width of the entire model, you can go ahead and place them onto your drawing accordingly. Now in this case, once we've gone and placed this in position, I have the ability to also add in any other changes that I want to make. So say if I go hit OK here and I want to reactivate the little tolerance or little dimension there. So I can hit the letter D for dimension on my keyboard here. I can pick the starting or the end point of that line. And I can also place it specifying the distance from the center of that hole. Now in this case, you can see this is overlapping my drawing. So what I can do is actually, I should be able to drag it out of position. So you can either place it between the lines, you can either place it up top there, whichever way you prefer it, or you can completely take it to the side as well, essentially specifying what sort of angle or what sort of distance you want to keep it at. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at is going to be, now this again is just placing general dimensions such as length and width. Say if you wanted to add in a radial dimension or if you wanted to add in an angular dimension there, how would you go about doing that? Now you don't necessarily have to go ahead and click on the angular dimension tab. Even if you went with the general dimension option, what you can do is you can choose the points there. You can see currently it's only giving me a certain specific distance. Now in this case, instead of picking the center point of that line, what I could have done is picked on the line itself or the edge itself and specified what sort of angle specification I want. So currently, sorry, apologies. So once I left click, having picked both those lines, I'm able to go ahead and place in a 45-degree angle using the general dimension tool itself. If you were to use the angular dimension tool, there would be nothing wrong with it because it'll only look to insert angular dimensions essentially on your drawing view. So it totally depends on whatever you're comfortable with. Either way, you'll be able to place the dimensions on the drawing sheet as you see fit, be it lengths, be it angles, be it widths, whatever you want on your drawing sheet. So I'm just going to go ahead and place this 45-degree angle here. Go ahead and right click and just choose OK. So once that is done, I suppose the next thing then is to go ahead and add in a couple of other dimensions. Now these dimensions will be a couple of radiuses that we're going to add into our model. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose the general dimension once again. Pick on the starting point from where I'd like the dimension to show up. It'll also give me the ability to choose what the endpoint should be. Alternatively, if you wanted to add in a radial dimension, instead of having to choose the starting and the endpoint for that line, what you could do is hover over the curve itself, and Fusion 360 will give you the exact dimensioning for that line. So you've got R30 available here. You can see with the help of that one left click that I made on that line itself, it's gone and stuck the R30 to my mouse cursor. Now, depending on where I make the second click, I'm able to give this an extended length, or if I'm happy enough with the way it's currently orientated, I could just place this dimension onto my drawing sheet and leave it as it is. You can then go ahead and say OK here. and it'll automatically leave that line, leave that dimension up there. Again, if you wanted to ever extend this, you can just grab onto the little dot that shows up, and you would be able to specify the stretch point for that dimension if needed. So just in case if you have any interferences with any other dimensions, you can choose to kind of move it out of the way if you're not happy enough with the positioning of that dimension. Now, again, you might have noticed that it's automatically gone and given me a radial dimension to boot. So in this case, what I can also do is I can also add in a diametric dimension if needed. Now, in this case, if I click on dimensions once again, you can see I can hover over any of these rounded edges or any of these holes on my model, and it will automatically predict what's the dimension I'm going with. Now, because I previously placed this dimension as a radius, it's no longer going to, or I will have to make a change to the setting to allow me to place it as a radial dimension or a diametric dimension, sorry. Now, in this case, what I can do is I can either go ahead and just choose to place it as a radial dimension there. So say if I place this as it is, now I haven't gone and hit OK or haven't hit the escape key, so it's still going to let me modify the dimension if needed. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and right click before I place the dimension. So in this case, once I've, sorry, apologies, should have given me the option to do that. So just under dimensions here, you have the ability to go ahead and change this from a radius dimension to a diameter dimension if needed. Now again, it's not going to make any difference to this dimension that has already been placed. Reason being, it does not recognize that little dimension to be currently active. So in this case, what I'm going to go ahead and do is say, just in case I wanted to place that diameter dimension first, I'm going to select this one, delete it, come back to my general dimension, place the little general dimension option up here, place it onto my drawing view. Now, before I make that second click to place this into position, I'm going to right click, and under this option, you'll see it gives me the ability to choose radius or diameter. So say if I choose the diameter option there, you'll see it automatically changes the way it appears. It also gives me a little diameter symbol before it, and I can go ahead and place this drawing or place this little dimension onto my drawing. Essentially, what happens here is you can place two different sets of dimensions on your drawing, such as a diameter or a radius, depending on whatever you see fit. So it is completely up to you, the designer of the drawing, on how they'd like to place this view and how they'd like to place these dimensions. Again, it depends on the manufacturer as well, on how they prefer to do it. So just in case you ever feel the need to change it, you have the ability to do it as quickly as possible. Now, the next thing then that we're going to focus on is adding in um, ordinate dimensions. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the projected view that I have on the side here and click on the ordinate dimension tab from the drop down, or you also have that available on your little top ribbon. So click on the ordinate dimension. Again, what's going to prompt you to do is define the origin view, or the view origin, which is going to be one of the edges from where this ordinate dimension should actually start off. So say if I go ahead and place this at the bottom of this edge up here, I can actually just place this as my origin point. So for those who are hoping to work with sheet metal parts, this is a very handy tool to have, specifically if you're going for flat pattern parts as well, because it enables the machinist to program the machine on how to exactly drill holes and very exactly to create the features that you specifically need. So with the help of this, what you can do is, even if you hover over the model, you can specify specific regions from where you want the coordinate system to be built up. Now, in this case, what I can also do is I can go ahead and be able to essentially place these in line. So say if I go ahead and try and place this 53.9 dimension, I have the ability to extend it out, hover over where the 0 dimension has been placed. Now I can essentially place this on this edge up here. So essentially, just to make the view appear a bit smoother, you want to try and keep it in line with the other. Essentially, it helps you save a bit of, helps you keep things a bit more organized. And say if I go ahead and place a reference view for that one there. So the center point of this hole is what I'm interested in. So say if I select that, place it right in line with this one here. Similarly, this one up here is going to be a point of reference. So essentially what this does, right, is it's going to give you the ability to add in as many position or as many coordinates as you need added in here. So basically, if I was the machinist and I was trying if I was trying to locate these holes on the model, essentially I would pick this as my origin point and then be able to define it at 85 mil, at 73 mil, at 60 mil, depending on whatever I'm trying to create with my model. So you can go ahead and place a couple of these little dimensions up here and be able to specify them onto your drawing sheet. And for the final coordinate, then I'm going to add in this 128 mil dimension, which is essentially giving me the endpoint or the height or the length in whatever case you use this ordinate set or these ordinate dimensions. So this is all about how you can go ahead and use these dimensions. And you can see at the moment I've got a little hazard symbol appearing onto my little 60.45 mil dimension. If I hover over it or if I click on top of it, it'll tell me that it needs to be reassociated because it's broken up contact with wherever the original hole was. So say if I was to reassociate this, I can then go ahead and select the reference that I want to set it to. Say if I go ahead and select that little center point, it's now been reassociated and you can see the hazard symbol has now gone off the model. So it is this easy to use the ordinate set dimensions within Fusion 360, and it'll basically help you generate drawings a lot faster, specifically if you're working with sheet metal components, because this is a very handy exercise for the sheet metal side of things. We might look at that in a bit more detail when we do the sheet metal tutorial, but again, this is a very, very handy tool to have at your disposal. So you can see how Fusion 360 drawing environment is very, very friendly and how it enables you to produce drawings a lot more quicker. Now, in this next exercise that we're going to look at, we're going to focus specifically on adding text and notes to the drawing that we're working on. So in this case, what I'm going to go ahead and do here, right, is I'm going to go ahead and just add in a couple of texts to my drawing, add in a couple of notes to the features and views, and we'll start off by working on, again, these texts and these notes can be set up for your manufacturing team. If at any given stage they need to look at certain bits of information, they can always find that information on the 2D drawing that they're looking at. Now, on your top ribbon, what you have available is a couple of ways that you can actually do that. So if you click on the little drop down for text, you have available the simple text note that can be added in. You also have whole thread, bend, or leader notes that can be automatically added in. Or if you wanted to add in a couple of them specifically, you can use these three options down there on that list at the bottom. Now, essentially, these can be used either for flat patterns or even generally if you wanted to specify any specifics about, say, about the holes on the model or even thread notes, for example, you can actually specify them in there and you can leave them onto the drawing sheet for your manufacturing team to go through. Now, in this case, if I go ahead and click on the little text option, I have the ability to just create a rectangle up here where I can specify the first and the second corners for that rectangle. And now you can also adjust the font or the sizing of that text if required. So what I'm going to do is just type in a general note here. So if these are applicable to all your models on the drawing or all the views that you've got on your drawing, you can make these notes and you can specify specific instructions for these for these views. So say if I go ahead and say remove all, I might just capitalize all of these. So remove all, all right. So I'll just go remove all burrs and sharp edges. Point 2 is then going to be all fillets and rounds, or you can say rounded edges are 6 unless specified otherwise. So essentially, when you put in a general note like this, the manufacturing team knows that unless you've specified the dimensions for those fillets or any of the rounded edges that you're looking at, these sizes have to be set to 6mm and 6mm only. So in this case, say once I've got this done and dusted, you can also justify it. Say if you wanted the text to be centered, if you're happy enough with placing the text view on the left hand side, you can go ahead and place that accordingly. Now you also have the ability to add in symbols. So I could have also mentioned that if say the diameter or remove or all the fillets and rounded edges that you see on the model will have to be set up to a diameter of 12 unless otherwise specified. So if you wanted to add in the symbol for diameter there, you could have added that in as well. Again, you can change the color of the text, bold, italics, or underline them if needed. Essentially, gives you the same ability as you would have adding in a normal bit of text on Microsoft Word. I'm just going to go ahead and hit close on this because everything has been placed, or you can go ahead and hit OK, and it'll leave that bit of text on your drawing there. Now, in this case, I can also move it around if needed, just in case you're not happy enough with where the orientation is, and it essentially helps you clean up the drawing a little bit. Now, the next thing that I'm going to focus on is going to be this little view right here in the middle, where we added in the ordinate dimensions. Now, in this case, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I will use the automatic command to place in notes or whole notes. So you can either click the drop down or you can just choose it off the top ribbon, where you can activate that by the letter N. Now, in this case, if I was to look at the types available to me, you'll see all three are available, essentially leader notes, whole and thread notes, or bend notes if needed. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I will essentially, once you've got that tool activated, what you can do is instead of having to select this from the drop down, you can leave it at automatic and then just select the edges that you want. So as soon as you select the edge, you see it changes the setting from automatic to whole and thread node because Fusion recognizes what you're currently looking at. So it helps you understand a bit more better, does the work for you rather than you having to select all of these holes and then having to select the whole and thread node option by yourself. So in this case, what I can do is I can specify the endpoint and say that is going to be my endpoint there. I can then go hit OK. And if I look at the whole node now, you'll notice that what I have is it's giving me specifics about the hole. Essentially, all four of these holes that you see are M5s. Their thread is 0.8. 6H is the horizontal direction in which this whole node is coming up, or the thread is being revolved. You have the ability to also adjust the way that the whole node actually appears. So just in case you have a view that is being interfered with, you can change that orientation as well. Essentially, this is how you would go about adding in a whole node onto your drawing. And again, the 4x that you see at the start, Fusion 360 recognizes the number of holes that you have on your view, or similar views or similar holes on that view, essentially. Now, what I'm going to focus on next is this little view down here, the detail view that we placed originally. Now, in this case, what you can also do is, even if you have a detail view with only one hole appearing on it, I can go ahead and choose the next option to add in these holes. So I could go with this little automatic hole node option, select the edge for the hole that I'm working with, automatically it changes the setting to hole and thread node. And if I specify the endpoint, then you'll see it also counts the number of holes that are not in view. So essentially it's referencing back to this little hole up here, and it's defining itself according to the wants and needs of that specific hole. So you can see 5.5 is the size of that hole, and you've also got 6 of those within the base view itself. So essentially it gives you this ability to go ahead and set those up automatically without you having to add in a bit more detail or add in a bit more text if it's not needed. Now what I'm also going to do is add in a bit of text node there. So bringing up the text node again, using this little curvature here, I'm going to specify that as, or sorry, I'm going to go ahead and use the leader node option, pick on that curve, and just add in a bit of text there, which says, check the minimum thickness is 2 millimeter. Once that's done, you can hit close on this and it'll automatically add in that bit of text note on your drawing as well. So essentially, you have the ability to add in these hole notes, thread notes, also add in any text notes that you wanted to, basically making sure that all the information that your machining team requires is available on the drawing itself. I hope that helps you understand a little bit. Essentially, this is where we go ahead and this is essentially where we add in a couple of views or a couple of notes onto our drawing. Now, right, the next thing that we're going to focus on is going to be just a few bits and bobs around adding in a few views. So bear with me. Now, say in this case, right, where you needed to add in, or where you've gone and added in a detail view and you needed to display any of the hidden lines, or you need to change the way the view works. So we're going to refocus on that. Now, once we've got the detail view created, what you have is the ability to also go right click on it and be able to edit the view if you needed to. Now, just in case you wanted to edit the little view down here at the bottom, you have the ability to just select it. And again, up here, what you have is the ability to add in center lines, center marks as well, if needed. Now, just coming back to the little topics that we needed to cover today, what we're going to go ahead and look at is just going to be around the, sorry, apologies. So what we're also going to focus on in a moment is just around adding little tolerances, adding in little, adding in and also looking at tables and balloons and so on. So in this case, what we'll also then do is look at what exports are available to you in that case. So again, whenever you're creating drawings from scratch, it is handy to have in a couple of whole tables, a couple of normal tables as well. You can see up here you've got the table option. So if you have any specific sort of part list that you want to go with, you can go ahead and adjust that from the part list option as well. You have bend tables, bend identifier, whole tables, revision tables as well that you can add in, and we'll take a look at a few of those bits today as well. Now, the next thing I want to focus on is just adding in surface finishing symbols if needed. Now, usually what tends to happen is, say if you haven't added in this little note down here where it says remove all burrs or sharp edges, you can also specify any internal surface finishes that you want. So say if I go ahead and choose this little option up here called surface texture, what's going to happen is it'll ask you to attach it to a specific object. Now in this case, I can go ahead and click there. I can create and continue. Now within this, what I can say is the roughness average. Sorry, apologies. For some reason, it seems to have gone off. I can add in a couple of symbols there. So if, say, you wanted to take off a bit of material, you can do that. If you wanted to go for a basic surface finish, you can add that in, or material removal prohibited, depending on what your needs are. Now, I can go ahead and also choose the all-around symbol, which will essentially specify that I want the surface finishing all around this little curved edge similar itself, or the way that it actually exists should be uniform throughout. Now, you have the ability to go ahead and specify what sort of finishing you want. Say if I go ahead and add in a machining option there. So I can tell them a roughness average between 2 and 3 is what I want to go with. I can hit close on this and it'll specify that sort of surface finish over there. Just in case you're not happy enough with the orientation, you can actually just move this out, and I'm going to go ahead and just do that in there. So I'm just going to orientate it a bit more correctly, try and move a few bits out of the way, and specify the base point for that. Sorry, just bear with me. See here. Here I can actually go ahead and place this outside of the view where it would make a bit more sense. Now again, you have the ability to look at first requirement, second requirement, third requirement. This one is your machining allowance. So basically you're allowing a bit of tolerance there on how much can the how much leeway does the machinist essentially have when it comes to this little surface finishing that you're looking at. Now you can also specify the direction in which it needs to be done. So I could go radial if required, and just go say okay there. So essentially, it'll allow a bit of tolerancing there. Surface finishing can be adjusted to 2 or 3, depending on whatever roughness average you're going with. Now, the next thing that I also want to take a look at is a couple of options here where you can also add in welding notes. So just in case if you have any assemblies that you're working on, or if you have any edges where welds need to be added on, you can choose the welding option, and you can also specify where exactly or how exactly should the welds be placed. So say if I go ahead and select this little rounded edge up here, I can specify this little point, and here you can specify what sort of weld is it going to be. So depending on what sort of welds need to be inserted into your assembly or into your components, you can specify what the weld type should be. Generally, you go for a fillet weld, or different types of welds that are available as well from the drop down to select from. So you can make those kind of notes added in as well. Say if I go over penetration depth, I'm just going to type in 2 mil. Essentially, it's going to go 2 mil deep into the model. You can size the weld depending on the components that you're working with, and essentially set this note onto your drawing. Now, that essentially is all about adding in surface finishing and welding notes onto your model. You also have the ability to insert images. So just in case you wanted to add in a bit of decal, or add in a bit of say a normal image onto your model, you can choose this option to insert an image where you can directly place it into your drawing. So just in case, say for example, if I want to place one of these into my model, what I can do is go up to my pictures somewhere up here, and I can add in a logo for myself. Say if I go ahead and choose the Symetri logo there, for example, I can go ahead and place this onto my drawing sheet. So essentially, this can be readjusted. Then you can adjust the angle, you can adjust the scaling, and you can leave it onto your drawing sheet if required. So again, this can be done as a watermark if needed, just in case you needed to add in your own information there, or if you needed to move it around, you can drag it and drop it into a specific region. So just in case, say I want to place that between this little box here, I have the ability to go ahead and paste that image into that title block as well. Now, again, if you're doing this in the part environment, it's handy enough because it'll work as a decal, where say if I go back to my part environment here for a second, I have the ability to insert this as a canvas or a DXF as well if needed. So you can actually emboss this onto your model. I'm sure Brian has already covered that in the previous sessions, but just in case you needed to know where that option is, it's available within your part environment as well. Now, just coming back to my drawing here, right, I'm going to focus on this little table option up here. So in this case, what I can do is choose a whole table. Now, what it's prompting me to do is select a view with an origin or select a point to be the origin as well. So say I go ahead and hover over that area where that is going to be my my origin point for the table. Now, again, you can see, depending on the way I move the mouse, it seems to flip itself over and over again. So say if I wanted to place it normally, I can go ahead and hit, sorry, apologies. I can go ahead and hit the shift key there on my keyboard, and it'll automatically go ahead and place the drawing view as needed. So what this little hole table then does, right, is it's going to recognize all the holes on your model, and it's automatically going to add in labels to them as well. This might be a bit too much for this model, I think, because there is too much going on there. But again, if you needed to move it out of the way, you can always select those labels, and you can just place them in a different space if needed. Say if I do this something similarly for this little base view that I've got, I still have the ability to edit this table and also choose what columns appear on my model. Now at the moment, you can see the symbol that appears for the origin point. So it's picking up the ISO origin. If I switch that to the datum target, it's going to replace that with that symbol showing you where the little origin point for that table essentially is. Now in this case, if I was to look at, I've actually gone and changed the table direction. It was currently set to up. I can change that to down. So any new holes that are added into the table will get added into the bottom rather than coming in from the top. Now you have the ability to also adjust or choose what columns you want to go with. So you're essentially specifying the placement of where these holes are located on the model next to their labels as well. So you can see currently I've got A1, A2, A3, gives you the X and Y coordinates for those holes and also description on what sort of holes they are. You can also arrange them by position, or you can arrange them by size. Now again, in these holes, they're all the same size, so it's not going to make much of a difference there. So we will have to go by position to rearrange them. Now, you can also give this a specific hole table name. So just in case you are not happy enough with it being called hole table, you can specify M 5.5 as the name. So essentially, all the 5.5 holes that, or 5.5 mil holes that are available on your drawing will automatically get listed within this table itself. So it just makes it a bit more easier for your machinist to figure out what holes are you referring to and what holes are the ones that he needs to focus on as well. Right, so that is what the whole table is about. The next thing then that I'd like to focus on is going to be this little option here where we've got balloons that are available. Now, the balloons, essentially the way they work is they're based off components. So if I go ahead and look at my part here, I've got multiple bodies in there, but it seems to be a single part. So say if I was to bring in a balloon there, let's say if I place a balloon there. Essentially, what this provides us with is a reference back to the parts list that we've got on our model. Now, what I'll do is I'll just bear with me 1 second. We'll take a look at an assembly there as well, and we'll start out by creating a parts list for that assembly and also place in a couple of balloons for that model as needed. Okay, so just cracking on from what we were looking at earlier, we were looking at the tables there, right? So we saw how you can actually add in a whole table in the previous example. Now in this example, what we're going to take a look at is how to add in a parts list and balloon this model if needed. So in this case, what I could actually do is just reference the parts list by selecting or by showing up the model or placing the model on my drawing sheet. I then have the ability to essentially choose where I'd like to place the drawing table or place the parts list onto my drawing. Now you can see at the moment the way that it's actually worked is it's also gone and inserted a couple of balloons by itself. So at the moment, what it's going to do here is it's going to only place the top level components or top level sub-assemblies within the parts list itself. If I want to take a look at the detailed parts list, in this case, what I can do is I can hit the escape key, double click on the parts list there, and then just choose what sort of structure I want to go with. If you want to take a look at all levels of this little parts list, you can choose all levels from the list there. And what it's going to then go ahead and do is it's going to replace that little table indicating each and every component that's available on that assembly drawing. Now, essentially, you can see the way that its naming structure has been placed as well. Depending on what part belongs to what sort of lower level component, it's also going to readjust the balloons. So that creates a bit of a mess there where you've got too much information going on within your drawing sheet. So I'm just going to go ahead and place this back up to the first level only, just for clarity in this case, and be able to drag and place the drawing table or the little parts list onto my drawing. Now, just in case you also wanted to add in a manual balloon to this list, say if you wanted to also pick up certain specific parts on this component that you also wanted to include within your model, what you can do is you can hover over that specific part, having selected the balloon tab, and then be able to just place a balloon within your model itself. Now, depending on what that component is, the balloon will automatically assign a number to itself. So at the moment, because this little tip or this little fin is a part of the main axis stage of our model, that's what it's going to represent under that little option. Now, you also have the ability to either create a standard or a patent balloon. Now, within the patent balloon, what it's going to allow you to do is it will allow you to select the edge of the component that you need to select, and you'd be able to create something of that sort where you can place the balloon with a little elliptical or with the freehand sketch, allowing you a bit more flexibility in terms of the way that your balloons appear on the drawing. So essentially, this is how you can go ahead and place your parts list. Say if you wanted to include or exclude a few bits on your model, you wanted to go back and readjust what parts should be showing up and what shouldn't, you have the ability to also create drawing views by turning on and off certain components if you do not want them to be part of the list. So in this case, because I have, say, the exhaust assembly being one of my main components, I can actually turn off this little option here, where what it's going to do is it's going to turn off the visibility of that top level component. So again, within the balloon itself, you can see it's gone and readjusted the parts list, having taken off the exhaust assembly completely from the main assembly view itself. So even if I have a base view placed, I have the ability to choose what I'd like to show on the assembly and what I'd like to hide, depending on whatever your needs are. In this case, you can always expand these main top level assemblies and then choose what components you also want to include or what components you also want to turn off. So just in case you have a lot of components like this and you want to adjust or you want to specify what should be shown and what shouldn't, you have the ability to actually check or uncheck these options and be able to modify them accordingly. Now, say if you wanted to include multiple components at the same time where you're actually turning them on and off, I can select these from my list, hold down the shift key, select all of them, and be able to suppress each one of them if required. I can also turn off their visibility. So turning off or by unchecking these boxes here within the model tree essentially will turn them off and suppress them for your model. Now, in this case, where I have a load of components within one subassembly itself, I have the ability to just select whatever components I want to turn off the visibility for. So turning off the visibility will not suppress them within your environment. Instead, what it's going to do is it's still going to show you that balloon number, but it'll come up with a little warning symbol indicating that your main or your top level assembly is currently being being turned off in that manner. So it is completely up to you on how you choose to actually show it. You can also hide and define parts, or you can bring them on into life according to the way you see fit. Essentially, this helps you define and detail your drawing views to a very deep level. If in case, say I wanted to turn off a few of these components that I see here currently, essentially what it'll help me with is a bit more clarity on my own model as well. So I can actually just go right click with these, bear with me while it loads, and I can hide all of these components if needed as well. It'll take a second to load there, but you can see it's gone and hidden off a few of those components from view as well. So essentially, this helps you define in a bit more detail and essentially find out what can be shown on your parts list and what can't. If at any given stage you wanted to say create a drawing view for any of these components, what you can do is you can always go back to the model itself, select the main assembly you want to work with, right click on it and choose. Okay, so it's giving you the option to create a drawing from the drop down itself. I can just choose that specific assembly, go ahead and hit OK there, and be able to define it within its own environment without interfering with the main model itself. So it gives me the ability to drop in the base view. I can adjust the scaling as well for this one. So say if I go for a 1:6, so you can have multiple sheets for bigger assemblies where everything can't be displayed within the same stage itself. Again, if I was to place a parts list for this little component or this little part of my assembly here, you can see the basic number of parts that I've got in here. Automatically, depending on the number being assigned within the parts list, you can adjust, you can filter, you can add in descriptions. You can also choose what columns you want to go with. So in this case, I can go ahead and choose what sort of parts list options I want. Now within this, you can either double click on this to find more options. So you can see item number, quantity, part number, description, material, mass, whatever you want to include can be chosen. If I wanted to, I can also export this parts list out as an Excel file. So say if I go with the CSV file export, I can just say exhaust assembly stage. Now I can save it to a specific location within my computer. So say if I save it onto my desktop here, I will have a Excel sheet exported within seconds. So if I was to go ahead and minimize my Fusion here for a second, you can see it gives me this little parts list up here. So exactly the way that it is available on my Fusion drawing, it will be available on the Excel sheet as well. If you needed to go for a bit more structure there, you can always double click this. Choose all levels. Again, this will lead to a lot of components showing up. So, okay, we've gone with all levels there. If I export this out now, again, as a CSV, so exhaust assembly, save it there. I can go ahead and open this up. Now the idea is basically that because you have this little Excel sheet here, what tends to happen is you can actually compete or you can combine these with what companies use are called as ERP systems, where they can check for what components are in stock and what aren't and what need to be ordered. So using this Excel sheet is a very handy tool because it makes life a lot easier for your machining team to find out what components they need to order in order to bring this assembly together. So this is essentially what the parts list is all about. The next thing then that I'm going to look at is going to be just the balloon alignment. So you can see you have an option here at the drop down where you can click on align balloons. You can choose whatever balloons need to be aligned properly. And once you've selected them, you can go right click, hit continue, and it'll prompt you to specify a specific start point. Say if I go for that, you can see the way it'll actually appear. You can right click and choose what sort of way you'd like to align them to. If you're happy enough with just the positioning that needs to be changed, you can just drag these around and you can reposition them according to the way you see fit. So again, it's completely up to you on how you like your balloons to be aligned, how you like your components to be aligned. Essentially, you can clean up the model using these tools that are available to you. Now, what I also have is a revision history table. So what it's going to go ahead and do is it's going to give me the option to create a revision history table up here. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go double click this once and table direction will be set to down. Now, what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and add in a couple of rows to this revision table. Now, the way that the revision table actually works is going to be, if I wanted to add in a couple of rows here, I can just select the revision table. Right, so the next thing or the last thing that we're going to look at is the export tools that are available. So at the moment, within when you're in the drawing environment, what you can actually do is export these out as either PDFs, or you can either export these out as DWGs, depending on whatever your needs are. You can also export these out as DXFs. So just in case you're working with sheet metal components, it'll help you, or it'll help your manufacturing team or your machining team to develop these products a lot faster when you export these out as DXF. It specifically works for sheet metal components, and that can be directly imported into laser cutting machines. So using them as, or exporting them as DXFs is a handy tool to have as well. You also have the ability to add in multiple sheets within the one PDF itself. So just in case, say I wanted to add in another drawing sheet here, right. So we're now going to take a look at the export tools that are available to us. So what we have available are export PDFs, exporting DWGs, exporting the sheet as a DXF file, or exporting this sheet as an Excel file as well. So essentially, these tools can come in handy depending on whatever stage of the process you're in. If you export these out as DXFs, it'll prompt you to select what sort of sheets you want to go with. So if you have multiple sheets within your drawing, you can also export them out. You can export them all out as one single PDF itself. Say if I go ahead and say OK there, it's going to prompt me to add in a name. I can just go ahead and say exhaust assembly. Save it to a specific location. If you wanted to save it to the cloud, you have the ability to save it to a specific project in the cloud as well. I'm just going to save it to my desktop for now. And as soon as I do that, I'm able to open up this PDF as well. So at any given stage, you have the ability to access these PDFs and also be able to look at the drawing itself. If I was to export this out as a DWG, it's going to prompt you what sort of DWG you want. You can either go with a simplified DWG or an AutoCAD DWG if required. So that is also something that you can work on. Again, AutoCAD drawings will be handier for people working on the factory floor. If it's not a sheet metal component, it just makes it a bit more easier for them to look at your models. So in this case, say if I export this out as an AutoCAD DWG, I can export out all the sheets that are included. Within the drop down, I have the ability to export these out as a 2013 AutoCAD drawing. So anybody who has access to even an older version of AutoCAD, say they're using 2019 AutoCAD, 2020, 2021, or any of that sort, they'd still be able to access these DWGs as they see fit. Similarly, we've got the option to export this sheet as a DXF. Again, it's going to be exported in the 2013 drawing format, where you can open this up as a DXF, making it easier for your machinists to take a look at this little component. You've also got the final option then, which is the CSV format. So we've already looked at the Excel sheet format, which it can be exported as, and you should then be able to just look at the model itself directly if needed. With that, I'd say thank you for joining me today, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure to run this webinar for you guys. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email them to myself or to Brian, and we'd be happy to help you. And again, we're here to support you, and good luck with the competition. And I hope today's session helped you out a good little bit in understanding a bit more about the drawing environment within Fusion 360 and the options available to you, and how you can leverage them to create the drawings as best as possible for yourselves. Once again, thank you for joining me, and have a nice day.